It's on the which one? The seminary page?
Yes.
Yeah, I do.
Now I'm gonna tag you.
It's a shit up the lip thing, not a
Oh, no,
look at that thing.
you did that one too. Yeah, she got to lesson. He has one.
Yeah, he does, but his
But
is
it's just not.
his is private.
Oh, he does have an Instagram?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know why that honestly surprises me.
I don't know.
Oh wait, I haven't posted shape since yet, did I?
I thought I saw.
No,
No, I haven't seen one.
Okay, okay.
I'm posting this.
Yeah, you can just tag me as a collaborator. Oh, well, that's nice.
She bought the chair from home for a reason.
Oh, really? That somebody brought that?
Yeah. It's got him comfortable.
Yeah, no, it looks good.
There's some backwards decorations.
Yeah, this one's weird. I can move this.
You said more for you, what?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't want my laptop to like cut off. But, that's fine. I'm good. Yeah, so let's go this back a little bit. All right, just let me know when we're ready. Good to go. Is the Okay, so because this is streaming directly to YouTube, you don't have to record it, right? All right, cool. All right. Again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. How's everyone doing? Good, good. You need a new water bottle, man. That's what the roots bottle. Should say sohba on it.
Actually,
Oh, okay. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Should I clip this on?
let's see, put it in front of you or clip it. Okay, whatever you're comfortable.
Yeah. Okay, so today's topic, who knows what it is?
The one blowing.
Tawakkul, right? I'll go into some definitions first, and then I'll start asking you all some questions. So, but one thing I do want to preface with looking over the topics you guys have done so far. Okay, you guys did Ikhlas. Oh, there's people. Oh, I see it. Okay. Okay. So yeah, going over the topics you guys have done so far. Ikhlas, emotional intelligence, shukr, sabr, zuhd, hasad. Or it says review with the Imam Mahad. Zuhud, hasad, tawbah, right? These are all topics you guys have done so far, correct? Oh, so what did y'all do? Oh, okay. Okay, cool. So, but at least you guys have done ikhlas, sabr, shukr. The other thing, which I guess, it would be cool if these topics were done in order. Um, just for, I guess maybe for future reference. Because you start to see how they're all like interconnected. And you can't, like, there's so much overlap because you can't have one without the other. Right? Sabr and shukr go hand in hand, right? Um, having ikhlas, right, requires you to have sabr, right? The topic that's listed right after tawakkul, which is today's topic, is contentment, right? Or So all of these things, you'll start to see like how, okay, I have to focus on certain aspects, right? When we talk about these topics, they're all like when it comes to like akhlaq and adab, a lot of these things seem pretty common sense. But we have to realize that our morals and ethics and our values are um, outlined by the Sharia or and by divine revelation. So we hear a lot of these things growing up. So even if you're not Muslim or you don't grow up Muslim, you'll hear about, okay, patience is a virtue, or love for your neighbor what you love for yourself, or help others in need, and all of these things, right? They all stem from somewhere, but they're pretty universal in terms of, if somebody wants to talk about um widely accepted morals and values. So you'll start to see though that as a Muslim, in order to truly implement all these things, as you're learning about them, don't think that, oh, I've heard this before. Think of the emphasis that Allah and His Messenger are placing on these particular values and where we lack in these particular values. And then from there, we have to work on ways to increase in our ikhlas, in our sabr, in our shukr, in our tawakkul, in our zuhud, in decreasing our hasad or completely eliminating it, because we don't want to have any hasad in our hearts. We want to have pure hearts and we want to have sincerity in all that we do. So but going into some definitions of tawakkul, right? So you guys are supposed to be taking Arabic as well, right? What's the root word for tawakkul? I'll help you. The ta is ziyada, it's extra. So what's the root? Wow, kaf, lam, wakala, right? And it doesn't always mean to rely. What else can it mean? To trust. Um, so that's not the exact definition, but Assalamualaikum. Let me open the chat too. So if you're online, feel free to also chime in on the chat. Okay. But you you do you do this act because you trust the person. And this is one of the definitions of wakala. So who knows what that is? When you really trust somebody, you'll allow them to do something on your behalf, or you'll give them extra responsibility because you trust them. What's this called? If you're a leader, if you're a manager, a really good leader or manager knows how to do this.
Delegating.
Exactly, right? So you can delegate something to someone, and it's because you trust them, right? You guys said to entrust something to someone, or you rely upon them to do this task, right? But Islamically, it has other implications, because when we talk about tawakkul, right, this implies number one, you're using the form of the verb fa'ala or wakkala. Have you guys gone into this yet? What that entails? When there's a on the ayn, right? When there's a shadda, you haven't gone to sarf yet? Okay. It's honestly, sarf is really interesting and fun. The most fun topic you'll take when learning Arabic is balagha, because that's where all the beauty of the Arabic language and the Quran and all the stuff comes in. But it's really interesting because not the aspect of sarf, because see Fatma rolling her eyes. It's not the aspect of like, okay, dhahaba, yadhabu, tadhabu, adhabu, like not that part. But when you learn that, okay, fa'ain lam, right? That's the trilateral root of every verb. When the ain has a shadda, it gives the implication of a continuous act or something that happens one after another or over and over again, right? So when you say wakkala, it's not that okay, Subhan, I'm entrusting you to do this one act or this one task and do it. And once you're done, that's it. No, it's like, okay, I'm continuously relying upon you, right? And when you say, so you don't, it's not from wakkala, tawakkul comes from tawakkala. The ta is extra. It doesn't necessarily give it a different meaning. But so when you're saying tawakkul, you are continuously relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we don't just rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala one time. It's not one and done. We are always in reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout our lives, right? From the moment our soul is blown into the fetus in our mother's wombs, we are then relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from that point until we take our last breath. So, so again, tawakkul comes from wakala, which means to delegate, entrust, or rely upon someone. It implies placing trust and confidence in another to take care of one's affairs, any task, any responsibilities, right? Um, so in the very famous Arabic lexicon or dictionary, very vast dictionary called Lisan al-Arab, um, it's tawakkul or wakala. Wakala is described as depending on another and to delegate affairs to them. So again, that same meaning. But when we get to the Islamic definition, of course, it's to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it requires a lot more depth than just saying we rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with full trust, with full certainty, right? With full trust and full certainty. So that's the hard part. But we also take into account the necessary means that fall within the Sharia, meaning as long as it's halal, we're not doing anything haram. We take the necessary means and we make our own efforts to achieve a desired outcome. But one of the most important things that we have to remember when it comes to tawakkul is that we do not control the outcome. We never control the outcome unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability in that situation to do so. Right? So if something's within our own hands, no matter what outcome we desire to happen, will not happen unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to happen. So no outcome is within our control except by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we still have to put in our work. We have to put in the efforts, and we have to take the necessary means or actions in order to fulfill that which we are trying to do. But everything else we rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even while we're doing these acts, we have to have that reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not entirely separate, but it's also not to the point where, you'll see some people where they either put in no effort or their effort is very minimal when they could be doing more. And then what's the excuse that they put? Oh, everything's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? They'll be like, oh, I'll work a whatever job for a subpar salary that barely allows me to, meet my needs or the needs of my family, because everything's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of us, right? Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of you by giving you ability, by giving you a brain, right? By giving you the capacity to go out and work and earn that income in order to take care of your family, right? Some people might say that, well, the companions used to give everything away and say that, oh, for instance, you had the famous example of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu when he gave away everything he owned. And they asked him, what did you leave for your family? He said, I left Allah and His Messenger, right? That doesn't mean that Abu Bakr radiallahu anh wouldn't take care of his family. No, he would. He was a very successful merchant by his own right? But it just meant that after the needs were covered, then he would give everything away. He wouldn't keep anything outside of what they needed to survive. So, tawakkul in the Islamic definition, it combines the believer's faith in Allah's wisdom and decree, right? The decree part is very important. It combines the believer's faith in Allah's wisdom and decree with proactive engagement, right? You have to be taking the initiative yourself in order to do whatever you can that's within your control, right? We do whatever we can that with our own two hands, that's in our control. In terms of seeking solutions or fulfilling responsibilities or completing tasks, right? And I'm sure all of you have heard the famous hadith about tawakkul. What's the famous line from this hadith? Tie your camel, right? Can anybody tell me the story behind this hadith or what the situation was? The Prophet ﷺ said this.
Should I leave my condo? I don't remember.
Okay. Anyone else want to give it a shot? Someone online? Oh, it's not. Okay. Go ahead.
I think was the story when a man left his camel outside the masjid and went to pray, and the Prophet ﷺ asked him, "Why did you leave the camel?" And he said, "Well, I trust Allah." And the Prophet ﷺ told him, "First tie your camel and then trust in Allah."
Yeah. So there's two narrations of this, right? The one is the one that you alluded to, where you said a man asked the Prophet ﷺ if he should tie his camel. Another one was what was just mentioned now, where the Prophet ﷺ saw a man leaving his camel untied, and he was going to go pray the salah. So regardless, the situation was the man, whether he was just leaving his camel untied to go pray, or the Prophet, or he went and asked the Prophet ﷺ directly. The point was, do you just leave things to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Right. So if we take the other narration where a man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "O Messenger of Allah, or Rasulullah, should I tie my camel and trust in Allah, or should I leave her untied and trust in Allah?" So in the Prophet ﷺ, he answered saying, "Tie her and trust in Allah. You do both." And in the other narration, the Prophet ﷺ saw the man leaving his camel untied, and he said that, why don't you tie your camel? And he said, I trust in Allah. And then he said, tie your camel and then trust in Allah. Right? Because this just shows that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged his followers, the companions, and for all of us, that we have to still navigate with a sense of logic, right? We have to move with logic. We can't just go about life and thinking that everything's just gonna fall into place. Everything's just gonna happen, right? Whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen. It's out of my hands. I can't do anything. Whether it's good or bad, I'll trust in Allah. There's two ways you can look at this. Either you see this person as extremely naive, that yes, you trust in Allah. If the camel stays, leaving it untied, this is by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Not anything else. Because, and a camel is a good example here, because the Arabs, especially the Bedouin Arabs, or even people from, or just anybody who deals with camels, right? It's not only Arabs. You have camels in other places. But they know the nature of camels. They know that they like to run away. They like to roam free. That's why you have to tie them down, or you have to keep them enclosed. You can't just let them roam around or graze freely. Otherwise, they're gone. So knowing this, if you don't tie down your camel, it's just gonna walk away. It's not gonna care. It's not gonna be like, oh, I need to stay because my master wants me to stay here. No, it's going to run away. So you're either very naive thinking that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gonna keep my camel here because I'm trusting in Allah. Right? That's not how it works. We always have good expectations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Which is called husnul dhan billah. We always have what? Good expectations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Actually, let me see. Do you guys have that as a topic? You do? Okay. I'm seeing where it is.
It's not in the list of topics.
Oh, it's not.
Finish, but I'm
Okay.
picked it up to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's
Oh, I do see it, Sheikh Arsalan. I knew I saw it somewhere. Husnul Dhan. So you guys will go over that mid-November, right? So you should have Husnul Dhan billah. You should have what's the right way to translate it? You should have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Husnul Dhan sometimes translates as benefit of the doubt, right? But we never doubt Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We always want to have a good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that no matter what, whatever is from Allah is good. So we have that, but we don't have an expectation that Allah, I'm trusting you, don't let me down, right? If you think that I'm going to just leave my car running outside, while I go inside and pray, because I'm trusting Allah to keep it there, right? Is that really the best way to go about things, just life in general? No, your car is probably gonna get jacked, right? Somebody's gonna see it running, right? Unless you take your keys inside with you. Nowadays, before when you used to have to put the key in and turn, that's the only way you could leave it on, right? Now, well, even then they could technically still steal it because sometimes the engine doesn't always shut off, whatever. But whatever the case is, you cannot just expect that, this is going to happen because I'm trusting in Allah. No, we still have to do what we have to do, right? If you leave your car running outside and you trusted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it would say that, or you claim you have tawakkul in Allah. If your car gets stolen, right, does that mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let you down? Yes, no? No. Maybe your car got stolen to teach you a lesson that, hey, don't be naive. Don't be dumb, right? You're supposed to do what is within your reach with your own two hands. What you can do with your own two hands, the ability that I gave you, the intellect that I gave you, use it, right? Don't just leave it, right? I'll tell you guys a personal story, okay? In Medina, which is one of the safest cities in the world, my car got stolen, okay? Alhamdulillah, it was found a few days later, but it still got stolen, right? So it was late at night. Was my wife pregnant at the time? I don't remember. She probably was. I'll just say she is. It's a better excuse this way. Late at night, she's craving pizza, right? And there was a pizza spot, down the street where we lived in Medina. So I went to go get pizza. And Medina, everybody's used to just leaving their cars running, getting out, going inside. Like one time, I forgot to turn off my car. I don't know why. I guess I got used to leaving it running. So it didn't occur to me to turn my engine off and then take my keys and then go into the grocery store and get groceries. I went and got groceries and everything. I checked out. My car was still there and it was still running. And I was like, oh my God, alhamdulillah, it didn't get stolen. But I leave my car for 5 minutes running outside the pizza store. I go inside. I thought the pizza would be ready. And they're like, oh, it's not ready yet. Just wait a few minutes. I come out, my car's gone. Right? And I'm like freaking out. Number one, I was like, oh my God, thank God I didn't have my son at the time was probably like 4 or 5 years old, maybe. I was like, thank God he wasn't with me in the car, right? Because if I was just running in, I would have just ran in and I would have just left him in the car, just, I know that's not usually the best thing to do. So any parents out there, don't ever do that. Okay, take the time to take your kid out of the car. But that's the thing, like it's normal to do that in Medina though. You ask anybody, I guess now things might have changed a little bit. But at least for the longest time, people leave their car running, whatever. I'm sure you guys have seen those videos of like people in Dubai are like, oh, I'm leaving my bag, my wallet, my phone, my keys, everything. I'm gonna go get in the full workout, come back out, it's still there, right? Um, I mean, you could say that that's probably because that the police are always around and they might catch you. But at the very least in Medina, it was more so because like that was just the adab and akhlaq everyone had. So even then, my car being stolen, I'll chalk it up to some kids wanting to do something stupid, so they stole my car and then went for a joyride and then they left it like basically like on the border of Medina.
Wait, they left it.
Yeah, they abandoned the car and they just left, right? Because there's checkpoints before you exit Medina.
I thought you were saying they got caught or something.
No, no, they didn't get caught. They didn't get caught. They didn't get caught. They just left it and like, like sometimes they'll do it to like really, really old cars, like those really old like junkers, and they'll take it outside of the city, and then once they're done with it, they may even just light it on fire just to leave it and then they'll walk away. But this, I think like somebody just wanted to take a joyride, whatever. They rode around the city and then before they got to the checkpoint, they just left it, right? I mean, also like I called the police right away, so they were on the lookout for my car. But that was the thing though. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala probably did that to teach me a lesson, right? I didn't think that, oh no, how could this happen? I'm in the city of the Prophet. This is Medina. This is a haram. This is a, sacred place, How could this happen? Because if you mold your tawakkul in that sense where it's like I expect these things to happen because I'm placing trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're setting yourself up to be disappointed, right? You're setting yourself up for disappointment if your expectation in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't come through. And that doesn't fall into husnul dhan billah, having good expectations or good opinions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So it's actually a fault in our own character if we approach tawakkul in this manner. Right? So we have to make sure. We have to make sure that we really tie our camel. We take whatever is within our own grasp, what we are capable of doing, and then we leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? What does that mean? Whatever the outcome is, right? Whatever the outcome is, we have to make sure that we are okay with that because we have placed our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says in his famous book Madarij al-Salikin, he says tawakkul is the reliance of the heart on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without attachment to the means, although taking the means is obligatory. So again, it's reliance of the heart in Allah, on Allah without attachment to the means, although taking the means or acting upon it, in this case, tying your camel, is obligatory, right? Not as in if you don't do it, you're sinful, but it could lead to you becoming sinful, as I mentioned, if you become disappointed in the outcome, right? That means that you're that then means you're disappointed in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed. And because you put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're essentially being disappointed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we don't want to fall into that. So we don't want to be attached to the means, like everything that we're doing. We don't want to have such a strong attachment to it. Otherwise, that leads to what? Who knows? If you have a really strong attachment to the process, to the means of the process of tying your camel, this leads to what?
When Allah decides what's better for you, it's not what you set yourself up for, then you'll you won't be able to accept it.
Yeah, that's the outcome. But becoming too attached to the means eh, ends in what? Like what starts to happen to you?
You can become arrogant. Like you think it's because of you. I don't know if you can hear me.
Can you say that again?
Yeah, like you can become arrogant. Like you start thinking, "Oh, I earned this. Like I did this. Like oh, look at all my hard work." Like whenever you get money or get a result.
I'm 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 okay, that is possible. I can see where you guys are coming from. That you guys are mentioning that you get this sense of like, oh, I'm doing this, right? Instead of thinking that this only happens because of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But I'm saying that look, if your focus is is solely on the means, right? So if you take the example of tying your camel, if you're so focused on tying your camel that you're almost obsessing over it, right? What does that lead to? Think of, I don't want to say mental or psychological, but not, it could lead to OCD. Well, I think OCD is just something that you have or you don't have, right? But what can that lead to? Like what's the result of that? You get anxiety, right? Because what does this have to do? This has to do with future outcomes. And what is anxiety? When you worry about the future, right? Some people become so obsessed with, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do that. I got to make sure this is right. I got to make sure that's right. I got to make sure that, I have everything in place, everything is set, right? But then they forget the reliance part. They forget the part where the outcome's not in your hands. They forget the part where no matter what you do, you can prepare as best as you can, right? Um, we're in Houston, we get a lot of hurricanes. Some person could build the most fortified, strongest hurricane shelter ever and prepare for it, but then it could get destroyed, right? If you do not have that balance where your faith, your iman, your certainty is in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his decree, and you are relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your heart, and you balance it out with not being so attached to the process of what you have to do or the means. So what Ibn al-Qayyim here is trying to say is that yes, you still have to do what you need to do, right? Take care of what you need to take care of, but don't be so hung up on it. Don't be so caught up with the process that you forget entirely that at the end of it all, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether something good happens or something bad happens, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's some wisdom in it. There's going to be some wisdom in it. And um we have to be okay with the outcome. Right? This is where all the overlap happens. You have to be content with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's decree. So for the person who prepares and builds a strong shelter, it could be made out of like titanium, whatever, stocked up with food and like, satellite internet, whatever it is, right? The state-of-the-art generator, all of that could get destroyed if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills it to happen. But if you're so caught up on all of that preparation and everything, and then you don't realize the outcomes out of your hands, you're gonna get anxious, you're gonna have anxiety, and then you're going to think that, then it starts to mess with your head, right? And then if it happens over and over and over and over again, that these outcomes keep happening that you're trying to prepare for and nothing seems to be going right, and you don't realize that there's some higher divine wisdom behind this all, then you're just going to fall into depression from all the anxiety, right? I saw that clip the other day that I think uh Sheikh Amar did the last plus one, where he mentioned that Muslims save billions of dollars on like prescription meds for a lot of these
I remember this.
because it's like if you truly learn your religion and you learn the proper code of conduct and character and morals and ethics and the mentality of a believer, right? That's not to say that people don't suffer from certain mental or psychological conditions, right? There are people whose brains have just been wired a certain way, and it could be a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but you don't neglect it entirely, right? You go and you seek your help and you figure it out and you try your best. And then the rest is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But for those people that aren't, clinically diagnosed with anxiety or any other neurological or psychological mental disorder, then when you start to feel this way, a lot of times people will just be like, just give me the drugs, right? Just give me give me whatever I need to take in order to feel better. Right? And then it goes into this vicious downward spiral cycle of, you can't deal with everything that life throws at you, and then you go to medication to feel better, but then it doesn't really um fix anything, right? It's just a band-aid that doesn't actually heal the wounds, right? And once the band-aid comes off, or it's like a temporary band-aid, right? It dissolves on its own, and the wound is still there. And then you try to slap on another temporary band-aid that dissolves, right? So a true proper Muslim, right? Because if you look at if you look at all these studies where it talks about people who have the most contentment in life, or they're happy, or they don't feel depressed or whatever, they're the people that believe in some type of higher being, right? And that doesn't just mean that, okay, you believe in God, you're going to be happy, right? It doesn't just mean that, okay, if you say la ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, you're just going to be happy and not depressed and not anxious. No, it's everything that comes with it, right? The code of conduct, the morals, the ethics, the values, the akhlaq, the adab that we're supposed to have as Muslims. All of this together will lead a person who doesn't suffer from any mental ailments to see that, life is what it is. It's all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's wisdom in it, there's beauty in it, there's happiness in it. And you will be happy in most cases if you just accept the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have husnul dhan billah, you have that good expectation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, I was supposed to just do definitions, but then I got into the whole tawakkul aspect of it. But actually, I guess because Ibn al-Qayyim gives a very profound definition, but if you just hear it, if I were to just tell you that tawakkul is the reliance of the heart on Allah without attachment to the means, although taking the means is obligatory, answer me honestly, how many of you would have had questions about this definition? Was it like very direct and clear from the beginning? No, right? It did require some explanation, but um it is very profound though. So if you really dig deep into it, just remember, don't be so attached to the process. That's like a worldly attachment, that everything has to fall into place. I have to plan everything. It has to go this way. Otherwise I'm not going to get my desired outcome. You don't know if you're going to get your desired outcome whether you do everything 100% or not. Okay, with those with that being said, um short activity time. Hey, you don't have to get up, something like that. It's just, we're not going to make you do trust falls or anything like that, right? Tawakkul falls. But maybe that's something that y'all can do another time. If I said do a tawakkul fall and Allah's gonna catch you, do you really think that's gonna happen? No. Right? That's kind of the tire camel. Don't do a blind fall and think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is gonna catch you. Okay, that's not gonna happen. Um I like to make you guys think about your own lives. I shared a personal story with you guys about my car being stolen in Medina. So I want you guys to think of that. That was an example of me learning my lesson that I should do a little bit more to tie my camel. Right? But I want y'all to give examples. It doesn't have to be something that happened to you. It could be something that you saw or you experienced somebody else going through, or even you don't even have to know them. It's just something that you saw and it it made you either question your own tawakkul or realize that this person displayed proper tawakkul or didn't display proper tawakkul and what they could have done to do better in that situation. Right? So just an example of tawakkul, whether it was displayed properly or wasn't displayed properly, and what could have been done to um what could have been done to in order to avoid not displaying proper tawakkul. Right? So think a little bit. Also online, if you guys want to share some stories, give you guys a few minutes.
Sure you don't want to do the polls?
I don't know. I don't know if the people online can do it. They might end up unless they like go on their couch and fall or sofa or bed and do a tawakkul fall. Have any of y'all ever done a trust fall before?
No, so
I don't remember if I ever did one or not. We used to try to do them as kids all the time, but
I actually don't know. But you like actually sleep spell. It's so scary.
that's the thing though. You have to in order to trust anyone or anything, you have to be willing to give up a certain level of control, right? So people who are anxious, they need to feel in control, right? The anxiety comes from the feeling of not being in control, right? And that really scares them and it freaks them out. So when you do a trust fall, you are quite literally giving up control of your own body and trusting that the person behind you is going to catch you, right? So it is scary. It's and here's the thing. When it comes to being human, just in general, right? A person's humanity and their feelings and all the weaknesses that come with being human. Islam doesn't tell us to just ignore it all, to be like, oh, why are you feeling this way? You're a Muslim. You should have faith. You should have iman. You should have yaqeen, certainty. You should have tawakkul, right? Don't be sad. Don't be anxious. Don't be this. Don't be that, right? But Islam doesn't teach us to completely shun and ignore or pretend that these types of feelings don't exist, right? But it teaches us that we have to constantly remind ourselves that when we feel this way, we have avenues in order to get out of those feelings. Right? Even you have so many examples where the Prophet ﷺ himself was faced with grief and sorrow and fear. And those examples are to teach us that the feeling itself is perfectly natural, it's perfectly normal, but we have to turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and remember those different aspects of Him being our Lord and Creator that will help us deal and navigate those feelings, right? Right? The Prophet ﷺ, him when he was in the cave with Abu Bakr, right? That you get the famous ayah, "La tahzan inna Allah ma'ana." It's not that that came from the Prophet ﷺ himself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had to reveal this ayah to tell Abu Bakr that don't be afraid. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. Right? Does that mean that the Prophet ﷺ wasn't worried? Does that mean that he was afraid? Does that mean that he was completely confident? No, it was possible that they would have caught him, and that would have been from the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have to just remind ourselves that when we are trying to do our best and we're trying to do what's right and we're sincere and we keep our intentions pure, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be with us, and whatever the outcome is, right? We just have to look at the wisdom in it at that point. So, anyone want to give some stories, examples, anything online? Yes, go ahead.
Um, um, so I mean, when it comes to tawakkul, I think I have tawakkul in one thing, for certainty. If I lose something, it doesn't matter how big or small it is. I think as a child, I read somewhere if you lose something and then you read or you keep reciting Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, you're sure to find that. And I have this ingrained in me right now. And I have so many examples, and one of them is during, the Pakistan Day parade thing that happens in August. So
Okay.
I got out of the car and I'm just waving my flag, and my glasses flew out on the highway. And now I can't see without my glasses. And my sister also lost something that day, and it was her metal water bottle. But ever since I lost my glasses that day, since that moment, I keep reciting this in my heart, even though I didn't really believe in God as much as other people do. But with this specific example, I just had this in me that I'm going to find my glasses on a highway. So lo and behold, after a few hours, probably 4 or 5 hours of being at the parade at night, we go back, try to find it. And I tell my family, I'm going to find it. And they're just, you're crazy. There's no way you're going to find these glasses on the highway. But me and my brother and my sister, we just go out, walk around the highway. There's nobody there. I'm just keep reciting it. I'm sure I'm gonna find it. And lo and behold, after probably 20 minutes, I found my glasses in perfect condition on the side of the road. So tawakkul in that sense, when I lose something, I'm sure to find it. Like I have that belief in me. But compared to what you said about the car, that is my only tawakkul that I have. If I lose something, Alhamdulillah, I just always find my things when I keep reciting this, and it just happens that I happen to find it. I don't know if it was a good example.
No, 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 of course. I, I think what really stands out there is that you didn't just, like you said that you don't feel like your your level of iman is so great or greater than any other people, but you have this thing in you that if you lose something and you recite inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, and you place your trust in Allah that you're going to get that thing back. That, yeah, that's one half. But then you also pointed out that you also did the other half, right? Where you actually went and looked for it, right? Even if the chances were slim, you still went and looked, right? That doesn't mean that you obsess over it and you spend days, combing every inch of the highway, but you just went and you looked, right? You didn't think that I'm just going to recite this and the glasses are just going to fall into my lap, right? Or somebody's just going to come and deliver them to me, right? No, you went and you looked, right? So you fulfilled both aspects where you placed your trust in Allah, and then you went and you did what you needed to do in order to get closer to your desired outcome, right?
Yeah.
So whatever outcomes we desire, we have to put in the effort towards those desires, or those outcomes. And if it's not the outcome we were expecting, then we have to, that's when our tawakkul comes into that's when it's tested, right? That's when we have to really show our true tawakkul that I did not receive my expected outcome, but I am content. There is contentment doesn't mean happiness, right? It just means that whatever happened, I'm going to be okay with it because I'm going to reflect and ponder over what wisdom is behind this, right? Maybe it's to teach me I should have done something differently, right? In my case, right, my car was stolen. So now I probably shouldn't be leaving my car running when going to pick up pizza, right? Alhamdulillah, I got my car back, right? But to be honest, I don't think I had any expectations at that point. I was like, my car's gone, it's gone. No, I really wanted it back, of course, but I did what I could. I went to the police, I filed a report, I waited, had to go and rent a car and stuff like that. And then it was funny because me, my wife took my wife's aunt and uncle out for dinner because they came from Umrah, they were visiting. In the middle of dinner, I got a phone call from the police. Hey, we found your car. So I was like, I gotta leave. Middle of dinner, so but no, alhamdulillah. But yeah, that was Jazakumullah khairan. Thank you for that example. Fawaz, I see you turned your camera on. Did you want to give an example? Share a
It
story?
was, yeah. And for me, it's like a simple one, where it's I got really sick like a few years ago, and then like my parents thankfully like they just had tawakkul that like whatever happens will be for the best. So, like they were able to like, especially like my mom, like she was able to like hold on and just like do what's best for like me and the family, and then like even like sometimes now she's like, yeah, I don't know how like I was able to like, she's like, don't get that sick again because like I don't know if I can do it again, but like I just kept like having faith in God and like trusting in Him that like whatever would happen, the situation would still be okay at the end. Like even if like my health didn't improve or if it did, stuff like that, like later on when my health improved, and then I like she told me about it, that I realized that like that, like that's what I thought about whenever you said like think an example of someone showing thoughtful.
Yeah. No, good. That brings up a good aspect of tawakkul when it comes to people's health, right? A lot of times when people get sick, they'll just people will approach it differently. They'll think that I'm sick, Allah is he's a shafi, he'll heal me, right? But then you're not going to do anything about it. This is a different angle of what you mentioned, right? When you actually are sick and you have tawakkul that, um, I'm sick, it is what it is, right? I could have been the healthiest person in the world, eat super healthy, very active, um, you know, uh, anytime you went to do a physical, everything came back, amazing. But then you fall sick, right? You could get some type of terminal illness, or catch something that makes you very sick, and you may be surprised at that. How could I get sick? How is this possible? Right? But if it happens, it happens. And then there's so many different angles at that point. You have to be okay with that outcome in that moment, that I'm sick, but then you have to start working towards getting better, right? You don't just you do what you need to do. You rest when you need to rest. You um get your nutrition when you need to get your nutrition. You take your medication when you need to take your medication. And the healthcare industry in America is an entirely different topic altogether, whether you're for it or against it. I'm not all too for it, but um there's do you completely ignore modern medicine and only go for a more holistic approach, right? Where's the balance there, right? Some people will think that, do I take medication because then I'm thinking the medication is going to heal me instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But no, you take the medication believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow that medication to heal you, right? So, is there a problem with that?
I'm a nurse.
Yes.
I think medicines heal you.
okay, so I don't mean healing, but at least do what that medication is claiming that it'll do, right? So I'll give a simple example. When you have pain, you take pain medication, right? Ibuprofen, acetaminophen, right? What else do they have? You know,
Opiates?
not the opiates, okay? Tylenol, Advil, Motrin, Panadol for those of you who have lived overseas. Um,
Aleve.
you can take it. Is there another one that I missed?
Yeah, Aleve. Naproxen.
Aleve, yeah, Aleve. So you can take it, right? Let's say you get hurt, you get injured, you have some inflammation, you have a headache. That's when most people take it, I think. You get a headache and you take something. You can take it, but does it always help? No, not always. Sometimes you can take some pain medication and you'll feel the pain go away, but steroids. So, um, that's where you think that, okay, I'm gonna take this medication because this is me using the means or taking the means, right? But I trust that this medication, whether it works or not, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My body is an amana. I need to take care of it. I need to do what I need to do in order to preserve it to the best of my ability. And in doing so, I'm gonna take this medication, right? Um, if you catch some type of bacterial infection, they prescribe you antibiotics, right? If you get a virus, you'll get some antiviral medication, right? Is it entirely so like I said, the issue that you get with health and sickness is that some people think that no, I'm not going to take medication because then I'm going to start to think that it's the medicine and not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there needs to be that balance, right? There's two sides to it. The means and the trust in Allah, right? Don't be so attached to the means and don't entirely, I have to word this very carefully. Don't blindly put all your trust into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the point where you're neglecting the means entirely. Right? I know there's a lot of looping around there, but that makes sense, right? Like I said, don't do a trust fall thinking that Allah is going to catch you. Because logically, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to catch you? Do you think you're going to fall back and a gust of wind is going to pick you up? No, that's not going to happen. Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? No. Right? Um, so yeah, that is a big one though when it comes to like medicine and treatment and healing. Like if you have a terminal illness, if you have cancer, right, and doctors are like, you only have X amount to live. Do you then just be like, okay, I'm just gonna take it, I'm gonna just live out my life? You know what the crazy thing is? Whenever I've noticed people that have cancer, they live healthier before they find out. They could have cancer for years and they seem okay, seemingly on the outside. Once they find out, it's like that mental burden deteriorates their health even more so than the actual cancer within their body, right? But you have examples where people were told you're only going to live X amount, but then they exceed it and they may even live for way longer than was estimated, right? That's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or people could say that you have X amount and they die before, or they reach that X, right? Whatever it is, we have to still take the means. Do we sit back and just take it? I have this terminal illness, it's going to kill me. Or do we try to um, treat ourselves in a manner in which we still have some, what do they call it? Something of life. Um, if somebody is really sick, you want to make sure that quality of life, right? Quality of life. Am I just going to be a vegetable, right? By doing these things, or am I going to cure the cancer, but then for the rest of my life I'm bedridden and I can't get up, I can't do anything on my own, which it can happen, right? Because you go through chemotherapy, you're putting radiation in your body, it could affect you in such a way that you won't have any quality of life whatsoever, right? You have to it all requires that balance, right? Go do what you need to do. Make sure you're doing it with full trust, conviction that whatever the outcome is, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and that you're okay with it. May not happiness or you know sadness, whatnot, that's irrelevant when it comes to being content with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Contentment means that you understand, you accept that what is happening is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And honestly, if people are able to let go and accept that, then you'll most likely be happy regardless of the situation. Right? You'll always see the silver linings. You'll always see the wisdom behind it. Or even if you don't see it, you're still okay with it, and you'll see the value of that in the hereafter. You wanted to say something, Swat?
That reminds me of like probably like the biggest anti-example of this. Um,
Okay.
like you know Stephen Hawking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you know where I'm going with this. He was like
I'm not sure yet, but go ahead.
he was diagnosed with ALS at like
Yeah.
16 or something. And the life expectancy from diagnosis with ALS is I mean, I think a nurse would know better, but I think it's like 5 or 10 years or something.
Okay.
And that's like a very hard cutoff. Like
Mhm.
it's like most people.
Yeah.
It's extremely abnormal to live beyond that.
And
If the
yeah.
paralysis literally makes its way up your body,
Mm-hmm.
for some reason it just didn't make its way past like here.
Yeah.
And like obviously, Allah blessed him with that for whatever reason. And even blessed him with a method of being able to communicate
Yeah.
through his little however it worked. And then he went and lived his whole life
Trying to refute the existence of God.
and even used that communication method to say like there is no God. And like in a very, very robotic computerized way. And I just think it's so like weirdly amazing that that's just like the reality of things.
It's funny because I didn't look into this myself, but I heard a lot of people say this, that even Stephen Hawking, as adamant as he was about the um you know like trying to prove that God doesn't exist, I had heard like around the time he was about to die, or like he died, that he was eventually coming around to the conclusion that there has to be you know some higher being or some higher force that is pushing all of this. So
I remember the clip of him going, "There is no God. We're all just dust."
yeah, what kind of life is that though?
I don't know. I mean, he lives his whole life in a
It is very depressing
and he made so many discoveries, and I feel like there was so much contentment to be had that he just didn't have.
yeah, it's fun.
Mysterious ways too.
Yeah. No, but the thing is, look, you were mentioning how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did give him certain blessings in this life. ALS, people probably won't see that as a blessing, but the fact that it didn't end his life short of what's expected, and he was able to even communicate and whatnot. Yeah, that's not to say that even people who don't believe in Islam and reject the truth can't be blessed in this life, right? But that's the extent of it. That's all they get. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman for a reason, because he's able to still have mercy upon people who violate his rights on a daily basis, right? We as humans are not capable of that. That's the whole definition of Ar-Rahman. He is Ar-Rahman, and I don't know if you guys will cover names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but just a little tidbit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is his mercy is all encompassing. Because Ar-Rahim is especially merciful, because it's a specific mercy for the believers. But Ar-Rahman is more broader in general, in the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mercy upon all of creation, no matter what, in some way, shape, or form. Right? So people who disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, people who commit shirk, you can't say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have any mercy upon them in some way, shape, or form in their lives. Only in this life. In the hereafter, we don't know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will deal with each person accordingly. So even though he had those mercies in this life, he still used whatever life he had to try and disprove the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And honestly, it's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the this is a funny example, and maybe some of you might have heard this from me before. Um, our teacher in Medina, Sheikh Hamid Akram al-Bukhari, he he used to teach a Sierra class weekly. And one time, this was when Stephen Hawking passed away, he wanted to use him as an example, saying that you can be smart, but you won't be pure, right? Um, and it sounds better in Arabic, right? He said, "Zakiyun laysa zakiyun," right? Because Zaki is smart, Zaki is pure. So you can be the smartest person in the world, but that doesn't mean that you have a pure heart, right? One that is inclined towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you can be somebody that people think is, the dumbest person in the room or not very bright, but they could be extremely pious. So maybe somebody like Stephen Hawking is an example for us to look at, that hey, you could be the pinnacle of intelligence according to a lot of circles, right? Some, they'll always say like, oh, even personally, physics is, it's not an easy subject, right? And then when you get into like all those other aspects of it, but is all of that intellect going to save him? Probably not. Right? I'm not one to say that. Who knows?
Well says no.
I don't know. Maybe he tried to type the Shahada on his little keypad before he passed away. We don't know, right? But it's funny because like when somebody dies, especially a celebrity, someone will put out a rumor that, oh, he took the Shahada before he passed away. I heard that about Michael Jackson. I heard that about, like, they found the Quran next to his bedside or something. Like, I don't. That's why we don't. I make it a rule for myself that unless like it's very clear that this person was evil and died upon their disbelief, and it's like known, clear. I don't like to say whether somebody, you never know. You don't know what a person went through or did, especially people are saying that Stephen Hawking was coming around to the idea of some higher power. I don't know, but is it most likely that he'll be that his intellect, if we say that, is his intellect going to save him? Most likely no. Probably not. Would you? You wouldn't be surprised
If
if,
she says intellect is what led to his demise.
yeah.
Because I feel like with the amount of research papers and amount of accomplishment you have done through talking about how God isn't real, you would develop a sort of like inherent alpha in knowing that.
Yeah, no, definitely. It comes with all of the above, the arrogance, the disbelief, the audacity to continue to try and disprove the existence of God. But no, I want to get back on topic with tawakkul. Does anybody else have any examples? We had two examples, and there's,
Can I give a personal example?
yeah, of course.
So this is like so my parents own a store, right? And I was little when it happened, so I don't really know the exact like legal details of how this could even happen, but basically there was he was leasing out the space
Hmm.
and there was an ownership transfer, and he basically, it was only 1 month of notice had to give. And he had absolutely no plans to leave that space and had no idea where to even start looking for another space. Um, and so we were just kind of like stuck, and I was really, so I've only heard this through my mom. But my dad was really stressed all the time. My mom was like, it's fine, right? Like whatever happens from all, like obviously we're gonna look for a different
Yeah.
space, but it's fine. And she kept telling my dad that, and like 9 months went by, and we're 4 kids. And this is when I was little, so even my oldest sister, she still in like college or med school or something.
Mm.
And so there's like bills to pay, there's all this going on. And so my dad was getting really stressed, but my mom was just never letting up. And alhamdulillah, the space they ended up finding after, I think it was a little more than 9 months, of my dad basically not working. They found a spot that was way, way, way more successful than the original one ever was. And, alhamdulillah, it was just very like, my mom just never let up, like not even for a second. She was chilling the whole time, like nothing's happening.
Well, that's good. It seems like your parents balance each other out. So
No, it's really funny because like it was interesting to see how my dad, obviously like he's gonna be more worried, right? Because he's the one running the store. It's his responsibility to provide for the family. But after like a few months went by, after like that 6 months mark, my dad started like my mom ended up being the one to take over looking for a new space because it was that the one goal she had that let it be easy for her to keep going. And for my dad, like it was a little bit of the opposite.
no,
But then after that, he was like, all right, fine.
no, that's good, mashallah. It's like I said, having you have to have that right balance, right? If you if you just think that you don't do anything and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just gonna provide, like it's not just gonna drop from the sky, right? You're gonna end up digging yourself in a deeper hole than you already were in. And if you are just so focused on the means, then yeah, you'll end up burning yourself out. You'll be super anxious all the time. You're going to start to it could even affect you not just mentally but physically as well, right? So you can have mental burnout, physical burnout, to where you're just like, okay, then you fall into despair and all these other things, and then that really, really allows um a door for shaitan to enter into your heart and start to, whisper to you that, it doesn't even have to be so blatant as in like, look, you did all of this and it didn't turn out the right way, and where's your God and stuff like. No, it could just cause you to just whisper into your head that like you're doing everything that you can, and look at what's going on, like, and just make you start to feel sorry for yourself and start to feel like, oh, nobody, this world is against me, all that other stuff. So we have to keep a strong will that is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through our reliance upon him. Right. So it's yeah, no, that's a good example of your parents displaying tawakkul, especially your mother, mashallah. Okay. I think we should move on unless somebody really wants to share. Sorry. No? Okay. Okay. No. So we mentioned that when you take um the means while relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those means should be what's allowed, right? Meaning that you don't want to transgress any bounds, right? So if you need to do something, if you need to get something done, right? So if I were to tell you, and this is according to Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, very famous scholar, if I were to tell you that he says that tawakkul in terms of taking means, it means that you put in the effort alongside with the trust, right? So Ibn Rajab says the essence of tawakkul is the true reliance of the heart upon Allah while taking the allowed means. Right? Taking the allowed means. So I already mentioned that it's pretty clear that allowed means is whatever is within the Sharia, whatever is within the bounds of Islam, right? You don't want to do anything haram in order to achieve your goal. Just in that statement alone, what tawakkul can you derive from just that statement, taking the allowed means?
Rise. Rise.
Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide it to you, whatever is there. What else? Like what when you hear that you have to take the allowed means or what is appropriate, right? What then are you putting your trust in?
That goodness won't be found in the haram things.
Yes. What else?
I guess it's kind of related, maybe not super direct, but like your risk is written for you. So it's like if you have trust in that, I think it's a hadith that then like whether you do it try through a halal or unhalal means, like if you have tawakkul in that like the statement that like your risk is written for you regardless, then you'll know like even if there's a really hard situation that like no, I just need to focus on like taking the halal means to figure out how I can get out of this and not turn to haram because like regardless everything is written for me already.
Yeah, good. And that's a good answer as well, sister.
Sin on wants to keep that. Promises Muslims Jannah. It's gonna fall from that.
Yeah, so the promise of Allah is true, right? If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wanting something for us, then there's the famous hadith that if all of mankind were to gather to harm you, no harm will befall you except what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. And then the opposite, if all of mankind were to gather to benefit you, you will receive no benefit unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills for it to happen. Whatever is meant to come to you will come to you, as the brother mentioned, like whatever is in your risk will come to you. Whatever is your nisab will come to you. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the means and He wants goodness for us, and He wants, He will give us the outcome we desire as long if we are placing our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will want to give us the outcome we desire. But if it's not what's best for us, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom is above ours, He is all wise. If He doesn't give it to us, then that just means that He's wanting something better for us that we don't see. The main thing I wanted to point out is that when you hear the allowed means, that means that now we have to place our trust, our tawakkul in the halal over the haram. Right? We have to place our trust that whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has deemed allowed for us, what is halal for us, is sufficient for us. That whatever outcome we are trying to achieve can be found within the realm of what is halal or what is allowed. And if we feel that we can't achieve it through the halal, then that is something that is lacking in us, right? And because end of the day, the outcome is not in our hands, right? This is like a mantra that we all have to repeat to ourselves. The outcome is not in our hands. I'll get to you in a second, Arfana. If we place our trust that what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has deemed allowed for us in halal in everything, right? Not just the means of achieving our outcomes, but we place our trust in that, then as the sister mentioned, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will see us working towards that, trying to stay within the halal and using that to, find more goodness in our life. Whether or not we achieve the outcome that we want, we will find goodness in trying to achieve it through only that which is halal, which Subhan mentioned too, that the goodness will be there if we try to achieve it through halal means, right? If you want to marry someone, you want to do it through halal means. What type of barakah do you think is going to be in the outcome of a relationship that is built upon haram interactions, right? If you want to earn a certain amount of money, right? What type of barakahs or goodness are you going to find in it if you're trying to achieve it through haram means, if you're trying to cheat, if you're trying to I don't know, if you try to achieve it through gambling, if you try to do some shady business, whatever it is, right? You could gain as much money as you want through those means, but then it's going to be completely devoid of any goodness, and either you're not going to be content with it, it's not going to be enough, you're going to feel incomplete, you're going to feel empty inside, you're going to feel even more depressed, and you're just going to want more and more and more, and it's never going to be enough, right? So we have to place our trust that not only is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we place our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to achieve the outcome we want. We place our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that through the means that He's providing for us in the bounds of, or the realm of that which is halal, that there's going to be goodness in that too. And that we're relying upon that goodness as well. Sister, what did you want to say?
You already said it. That's what I was gonna say, is the barakat of doing something halal that, makes a big difference.
Yes, yes, definitely. A lot of times, uh, as an imam, I'll hear this for young people trying to get married. Oh, I like so and so, but my parents keep saying no. They have no reason to say no, but they keep saying no, right? This is this is one of the more harsher advices I'll give, but I'll tell them that, look, they could say no just because I don't know, some weird example, right? They don't like his eyes or something. I don't know. Whatever the reason is, they could say no. As long as it's nothing like absolutely ridiculous, right? But if you don't have, like, if choosing someone to marry someone over the approval of your parents, which will cause, it'll be blatant disobedience. It will be um, something that may break ties of kinship with them. Because too many times you'll find people, they'll elope with someone, and then the parents will be like, okay, I'm never going to talk to you again. Right? Do you think that your relationship with your spouse at that point will have barakah in it? Is it possible? Yes. Is it probable? Probably not. You always have to look at those things. Like sometimes you could go and marry someone and then your parents eventually come around. Is that always the case? I don't know. Maybe that happens when the parents are completely in the wrong. But I mean, I'm not going to put any, cause to reason. But um, if you truly want a blessed relationship with your spouse, with your parents, even with your own children, right? Then you have to make sure that you uh, try to obtain those outcomes through proper means, right? We're not supposed to disobey our parents. We're supposed to honor them. We're supposed to keep ties of kinship. Every situation is different, so it's not like a, you know, one solution fits all. But if somebody is like, oh, my parents just keep saying no, like maybe they think that they're not from the same tribe, they're not from the same culture, they're not from the same village, whatever it is, whatever the reason is, they have the reason. As long as, we as children have to understand that our parents usually, when it comes to marriage, it gets a little tricky, but usually they have our best interests at heart, right? Usually they have our best interests at heart. If we see that and we understand that and we know that to be true in that situation, then yeah, of course. If it's a situation where it's like, no, they want me to marry someone else, but it's for um a reason that's not so pious and um for a reason that may end up making your life more difficult. Um, and I'm sure you guys can use your imagination to think up of different scenarios for that. Then that's different, right? That's a whole different situation. But again, we need to make sure that we try to obtain our outcomes through necessary allowed means, halal means, in order to obtain the barakah that comes with it. And even then, even if we don't get the outcome, right, there will still be goodness in the process itself. And we will hopefully we're able to see the goodness in that. Hopefully we're able to uh not just see it, but also feel like we're benefiting from the goodness. Because the goodness will always be there. If you're sincere and you're um pure in your intentions, the goodness will be there. It's just up to us to recognize it and see it. Okay. So from that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions tawakkul in the Quran in different places. One of the most famous ayahs that we find the mention of tawakkul in, right? I had more ayahs, but I don't want to take too long. Is from Surah Talaq. In Surah Talaq, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it starts in verse 2, the end of verse 2, but then the tawakkul itself is mentioned in verse 3. In the end of verse 2, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَّهُ مَخْرَجًا. And whomsoever has taqwa, has consciousness, awareness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will make a way out for him. يَجْعَل لَّهُ مَخْرَجًا. Right? So whatever the situation is, if you have taqwa, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make a way out for you. Right? He'll open that door for you, and you just have to place your trust in Allah and wait for that door to come, and you'll see it. Maybe the door out is not what you expected it to be, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most wise, all-knowing. So we just have to hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy that whatever it is our way out. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will sustain him or give him his rizq from a place that's unexpected. Essentially, that's what it's saying. You would never in a million years imagine that your rizq is coming from this place, right? You could work all your life, study hard, get the best grades, go to the best schools, go to the best college, and try to become a doctor, engineer, lawyer, whatever it is that you're aiming towards being. And even if you become those things, you could try and work and work and work and try to obtain, maybe you want to work just for the sake of making a lot of money, right? You don't know where that money is going to come from. You could do everything that you can, and it may not come through those means, right? Or in another instance, you may try to achieve something in your life, whether it's a project or whatever it is, and you're unable to achieve it. No matter what you try, whatever your plan is, it may not happen that way. You can, something that may be a little bit more personal for some people. You may try to, when people get married and they decide to have kids, maybe it doesn't happen right away. And you may try and try and try and it doesn't happen. But then a lot of times people end up giving up too. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make another way for it to happen. Right? Whatever it is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written for it to happen in a certain way, and it may be completely outside of our expectations. But when it does happen, like as I mentioned, whatever the goodness is, we have to be able to recognize it. Right? I personally have seen this so many times in my own life where I was not expecting something and it just happened, right? I'll give the most simplest of examples. I was in Medina and this is June, so it's summertime, it's hot, it's over 100 degrees every single day. I didn't have a car. I didn't want to use a bunch of money on taxis. I was by myself, my family wasn't with me. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna walk, right? I already took a taxi from my dorm because I was in the off-campus dorms all the way to the university, and then I had nothing else to do the rest of the day. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna walk to Masjid al-Nabawi. And this is between Dhuhr and Asr, super hot, right? So I'm just walking. I was like, it's fine, whatever. I'm just gonna walk. I'm walking. Random guy, and this happens a lot too. Random guy, uh, stops his car, rolls down his window. He's like, "Hey, where are you headed?" And mind you, it's not like I was walking for a long time. I had just exited the university, and it wasn't even another student. It was just a random Saudi guy. He rolls down his window, where are you going? I was like, oh, I'm walking to the Haram, to Masjid Nabawi. He's like, okay, get in, I'll drop you off. Right. I I was not expecting to get in a cab. I didn't even stand on the side. A lot of times you'll see people standing on the side of the road, put their hand up, so a taxi or car, whoever. Well, I was just walking. The guy saw me walking, and he just rolled down his window, and he asked me, right? This was meant to happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wrote for it to happen. This was part of my rizq that I don't, get to Masjid Nabawi after walking. Probably would take it anywhere from half an hour to an hour, right? Because it's like a 10-minute drive. I don't know. I forgot how long it takes to drive there. But and in the heat, like hottest part of the day. But it was written for me that I would not have to do that, even though I myself was like, okay, I had already had the conviction to just walk the whole way, right? I was like, let me just get in some exercise. It'll be good for me. But it came from nowhere. I didn't expect it. And number one, I was like, man, Medina really is a blessed city. But number two, like this was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when I had, it came from left field. I had no idea. I wasn't expecting it at all. وَيَرْزُقُهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And whoever relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. He is sufficient for him. He is sufficient for him. Because then, no matter what happens in your life, if you are relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't need anything else. You won't have any disappointments. You won't have any anxieties in terms of not achieving the outcome that you wanted. You won't have you have that contentment that whatever is happening to you or happens to you was written, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is allowing it to happen, and that your your contentment is in the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you are just hoping for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And just you see this, and this has been mentioned a lot over the past year. When you look at the people of Palestine and Gaza, when everything is crumbling around them and body parts are flying from explosions and whatnot, they continue to repeat over and over, Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. Right? وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Hasbi Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough for me. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is enough for me. وَنِعْمَ الْوَكِيلَ, and he is the best of. Here, wakil, where does that come from? Wakala, right? Wakala, wakil, right? A wakil is somebody that you entrust your affairs to, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of those you entrust your affairs to. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and tawakkul is mentioned in other places as well. Let me see. But in terms of ayat, that was the main one. For hadith, I did mention the famous one already, where the Prophet ﷺ told a man to tie his camel and then rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are other hadith, famously from Umar bin al-Khattab radiallahu anh. He said that Rasulullah sallallahu said that لو أنكم توكلتم على الله حق توكله لرزقتم كما يرزق الطير تغدو خماصا وتروح بطانا. What does that mean? That if you were to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as he should be relied upon, right? حق توكله, right? As he should be, or he is deserving to be relied upon, you would be provided for like the birds. You would be provided for like the birds. And then he goes on to explain, they go out in the morning with empty stomachs and they return full. right? Every day when an animal goes out to seek its provision, it doesn't know exactly where it's going to come from, but they go out and they find what they need to find and they feed themselves, and then they come back to their homes whenever they have achieved what it is that they wanted to achieve. So we talked about tie your camel and then have tawakkul. And then in another hadith, Anas bin Malik radiallahu anh, he said that النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم said, إذا توكل العبد على الله توكلا صادقا كفاه كل هم. Right, so the Prophet ﷺ said, and this is narrated in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad. The first hadith I mentioned is narrated in Tirmidhi, but Anas bin Malik radiallahu anh, he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, if a servant truly relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah suffices for him in every worry. In every worry. So this comes back to where if you're able to truly rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you find that balance, then your anxieties will lessen, because then your reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should hopefully overcome any worries or anxieties that you have from that certain task. And then we mentioned that in order to have proper tawakkul, we have to have good expectations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, good opinion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because you have the famous hadith, which you'll probably hear when you go over Husnul Dhan Billah, famous hadith narrated in Bukhari and Muslim, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, hadith Qudsi, قال الله تعالى أنا عند ظن عبدي بي أنا عند ظن عبدي بي. I am as my servant thinks of me. I am as my servant thinks of me. We think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we place our trust in Him. And if the outcome does not match our expectations, then we think good of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that whatever the outcome is in His divine wisdom better for us. And there's something in there that we can find goodness in. And then there's a hadith narrated in Abu Dawood that talks about Allah's sufficiency, Him being sufficient for us. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, someone's knocking at the door, I think. Check. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh says that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, من قال حسبي الله لا إله إلا هو عليه توكلت وهو رب العرش العظيم كفاه الله ما همه. So it's very similar to the hadith I mentioned from Anas bin Malik radiallahu anh. But this includes the dua that we read in order to, or dua for tawakkul in Allah. Right? So Abu Hurairah said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever says, Hasbi Allah, Allah is sufficient for me, La ilaha illahu, there's no God worthy of worship except Him, alayhi tawakkalt, in Him I place my trust, wa huwa rabbul arshil azim, and He is the Lord of the mighty throne. Then the Prophet ﷺ said, if you recite this, Allah will suffice him for whatever worries him. So if we have something that we want to have happen, and we are taking the means to do it, we should recite this dua, affirming our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and reminding ourselves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one we are placing our trust in. He is enough for me, regardless of the outcome, regardless of the situation, and that placing my trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will suffice for me in whatever I am worried about, or whatever worries I have for the situation. I'm going to just conclude with some statements from the scholars about tawakkul. And then if you guys have any questions or any comments or anything you want to talk about concerning tawakkul, or maybe even any of the past topics you guys have covered, feel free to do so. We have about 11 minutes left. So I talked about Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, but he says, rahimahullah, that tawakkul is the reliance of the heart on Allah without being attached to the means, although taking the means is obligatory. And I did go into some detail about what that means. Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, he says that tawakkul is a state of the believers. It is only complete with having good expectations of Allah and taking lawful means. So according to Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah, tawakkul requires us to have good expectations of Allah and trying to achieve our outcome through lawful means. Imam al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, he says that tawakkul is to have more trust in what is with Allah than what you have in your own hand. Have more trust in what is with Allah than what you have in your own hand. That kind of circles back to what Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, says. Don't be so attached to the means. Detach yourself from what's in your own hands. That doesn't mean drop it and don't think about it, ignore it completely, just expect whatever is to come from Allah. No, that just means that we trust more what comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than what we are doing ourselves. We still do it. Still got to do it. Right? I'm not going to ensure that my kids make it home from school if I'm just sitting here and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to teleport them to our home. Right? But I trust that I get in my car, I drive to the school, pick up my kids, drive them home, and this is all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But that's how I ensure that they get home. Ibn Rajab rahimullah, he says that the essence of tawakkul is true reliance of the heart upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for bringing benefits and warding off harm in worldly and otherworldly matters. Bringing benefits and warding off harm. So not only are you trying to benefit yourself, but you're also trying to keep harm away from yourself and relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in matters of this world and the akhirah, in the hereafter. Entrusting all affairs to Him while taking the allowed means. Imam Malik rahimahullah says that when you decide on something, put your trust in Allah and do not stop due to doubt or fear. If you have doubts or fear, you continue to trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses any matter that begins with His remembrance. Right? So Imam Malik is telling us, rahimahullah, that we should have a level of awareness and consciousness in placing our trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just have it be something that's just always in the back of our mind that we just do subconsciously. If we take a task and then we start with remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like I mentioned, if we say, Hasbi Allah, la ilaha illahu, alayhi tawakkaltu wa huwa rabbul arshil azim, then we are consciously, actively beginning the task with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in mind. And through that, Imam Malik is telling us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bless that matter because we started with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why when we start anything, we say Bismillah. Right? And some people will say Bismillah, Tawakkaltu ala Allah. Right? Bismillah, or in the name of Allah, I am relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he says, Tawakkul is to trust Allah for your sustenance. When the world comes to you, you thank Him, and when it turns away, you are patient. So Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah is reminding us to display sabr and shukr because we rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our sustenance to come to us. We use the allowed means, and when it comes to us, we thank Him, and when it doesn't come to us, we are patient. So regardless of abundance in blessings or abundance in hardship, we remain reliant upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he says that tawakkul, or reliance upon Allah, is among the greatest causes of inner peace. It is among the greatest causes of inner peace. And in the Arabic, he says ar-raha al-qalbiyya, right? Meaning like your heart is just at peace. And the strongest means of basically delegating all of our affairs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just through tawakkul. Al-Fudayl ibn Iyad rahimahullah, he says that whoever knows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whoever knows, so that requires us to study Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is the result of that? We will rely upon him. Whoever knows Allah will rely upon him, and whoever knows people will rely upon the world. Right? This was one of the most interesting statements that I came across. What do you guys think that means? Know Allah, you'll rely upon him. Know people, and you'll rely upon the world.
People we will rely upon what you say.
The world. Like you'll rely upon the dunya.
Stephen Hawking.
Yeah, I guess. So when we learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we know him, right, we're told that to know Allah and his messenger is to love them, right? The more we learn about Allah, the more our love for Allah increases. The more we learn about the Prophet ﷺ, the more our love for him increases. So when we know Allah, then it's easier for us to understand his power and his mercy, and then to rely upon that power and mercy, right? It's you can't expect just blind trust, and for that to be the foundation of your tawakkul, right? Our foundation needs to be strong. Otherwise, if we rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it's something heavy, and our knowledge of Allah and our love and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is weak, then it's just going to come crashing through, right? And we may be in a worse place than we had initially been at. So when we do the opposite and we don't know about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but instead we're too focused on knowing people, in the sense that, we rely more upon the power of people or worldly connections and worldly means, then it's going to fail us, right? It's going to fail us. We're going to be, maybe we get that outcome and then it gets to our heads, or maybe we don't get that outcome and then it leads us to having more worries and anxieties and falling into despair. So true knowledge of Allah leads to reliance on him alone. And if we don't have knowledge of Allah, but instead we have more knowledge, or we place more emphasis on knowledge of worldly affairs, then we're just going to continue to rely upon that, right? Like you mentioned, Stephen Hawking. He, to have Iman means you have to take that leap of faith. We believe in the unseen. We don't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can say that from what we observe, we can't, it doesn't necessarily prove the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but we can see and come to conclusions that this must have been from a higher power or deity. Yes.
So you were talking about the guy who said, even if you have intellect, if you don't have God, matters not. And it made me remember something that was in the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
in 2 Corinthians chapter 13. But it talks about how even if you can speak in 1,000 languages, if you have all the riches of the world, if you have the best education, whatever, if you don't have love, and among some Christians they say God is love, if you don't have love, you have nothing. And so all of those other things outside of God adds up to nothingness.
Mm. Yeah, we can see that in our lives, really. If what like I had mentioned earlier, like when people they did the study where people who believe in some higher being are overall happier than people who don't. Like it's just, and then I mentioned like what kind of life is it where you don't believe in an afterlife, or you don't believe in God, and then it's like where do people think that laws and morals and ethics are coming from, right? So one of my mentors and sheikhs, he told me that, he feels like uh in today's day and age, shaitan, of course, we know shaitan is done trying to make us worship statues and trees and rocks. Whoever's doing it will do it. The Muslims won't fall into that, and majority of mankind probably won't fall into it. But what shaitan is trying to convince us of is that our is worshiping our own intellect, thinking that we're too smart to believe in a higher power, in a higher being. And that is what will get in the way of many people converting to Islam. And that is what you'll find atheists will try to push, that oh, think logically, look at this, look at that. But really, that if you understand the human situation, it's like we ourselves are very limited in our capacity. We don't have full access to our brain functions, right? Our brain functions at what capacity? Like, what is it like? It's not,
It's not.
that's not a thing.
Apparently, it's very like questionable.
Is it?
It's like an old saying that might be very questionable.
Maybe.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I've heard recently.
Yeah.
Now that yeah,
It's a common.
Okay, exactly. See, human observation is constantly changing. Okay. So even if that's
Yeah.
wrong, it still proves my point. Our observation is very limited, right? Yes.
So there's like different wavelengths that our brain operates on. There's delta, alpha,
Yeah.
beta, and the highest level of functioning is at gamma, and that's when your brain is actively being utilized. And the best way to help people understand it is like when someone is in the zone, like
Yeah.
watch a basketball player and gets every ball inside the hoop. He's on fire. It's active.
Yeah.
His whole body is involved, just bringing everything.
Yeah.
It can happen. It's rare.
Yeah, I mean, I know exactly what you're saying. Because usually it's due to like an adrenaline rush, or something is there's some catalyst behind it. You're not functioning at that level at all times, right? Especially, okay, for myself, I have ADHD, right? So when it's crunch time, that's when things start to pick up for me, and that's when you feel like you're in the zone, right? There's that I don't know how much of a theory it is, but I've seen like a reel that's like a meme about that with ADHD people. In emergency situations, usually, right, neurotypical people will shut down because it's overwhelming for them. They don't know what to do. They'll either panic, or they'll completely shut down. Whereas somebody with ADD, everything actually like starts to slow down for them, and they're the ones who are really good in these hypercritical situations. So the reel was like, it was from the show Futurama, where the entire building's on fire, and then like the main character, he's moving in slow motion, and he's like saving all his friends, and like if they're on fire, he's blowing it out. Like everything seems to be like frozen in time except him.
Video.
I guess, yeah. He's acting as Neo in that situation, right? So from the Matrix. So that's kind of the thing, right? We're not functioning at that level at all times. Humans just aren't, right? And the point being that our capability and what we observe is very, very limited. So we can't even rely upon our own intellect to answer everything. It's just not possible, right? So we have to, if for people who try to logically justify or disprove the existence of God, that in and of itself is flawed, because the scientific method can be disproven at any given moment. You observe one thing, then you observe something else, right? You can say the sky is blue, but then what if tomorrow the sky is red, right? It can happen. The sky, like, um, you see the northern lights, right? One of my friends in Pennsylvania, he sent pictures, looks beautiful. 1 second the sky's pink, another second the sky's blue, or red, purple, another second the sky's green, right? So it's like, if one person had never seen the sky before, and then they looked outside and they saw that the sky was pink in that instance, and then he never saw the sky again, he's gonna live his whole life thinking the sky is pink. But is that a universal truth? No, we get our universal truths from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? What we find, what He has revealed to us, those are universal truths, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're always observable, because part of our faith is belief in the unseen. And just faith as a concept means that you have to take that leap over some form of unknown, right? So, and living a life without faith is just, like I said, we said, what kind of life is that? You'll be depressed, you'll be sad, your brain will constantly be like, what is this world for? What am I living for? And maybe for some people that causes them to make these crazy discoveries in the universe and physics and stuff like that. But overall, you can, like I said, your intellect, end of the day, is not going to save you. And one last quote from a scholar, Ibn Ata'illah, says in his famous book, Al-Hikam, that tawakkul is the trust in what is in Allah's hands, right? So that goes back to some of the other statements. Trust what is in Allah's hands, not what is in your own hands, right? Who said that again? I think it was Ibn Taymiyyah. No. Let me go back to see who said that. But we trust what is in Allah's hands over what is in our own hands. So Ibn Ata'illah said that tawakkul is trusting what is in Allah's hands. Even Imam Ahmed rahimahullah, he said that I do not engage in any matter without first placing my trust in Allah. Tawakkul is to resolve upon action and then hand the entire matter over to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you want to think of a process, before you start something, in the name of Allah, and then you place your trust in Allah, then you do the action, and then once you've done what you can do, you place everything else into the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whatever the outcome is the outcome. Hasbi Allahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Any questions online, in person? Because that's about it. Yes.
If, for example, the anxiety that comes with bearing all of them, and a lot of that stems from, or I guess it's too much. Is that, I guess, anxiety at the beginning also necessary to make sure that you take things?
Yeah, so there's good anxiety and there's bad anxiety, and then there's uncontrollable anxiety, right? So if you have something, if your brain is wired in a way where you can't control your anxiety and you need to find some help or some means to help with that, okay, that's something entirely different. But good anxiety is basically, you have at least that level of pressure upon yourself that I still need to do these things in order to get it done, right? But when you are so attached to those means, those acts, the process, having everything in place, to where if it does not go the way you prepared for it to go, and then it causes, that level of anxiety where it's like you start to freak out, you start to fall into despair, you start to, have bad thoughts. That's the bad anxiety. So yes, of course, in anything, there's a certain level of anxiety that you need, that's kind of like that self motivator, right? That will push you. But you have to really be conscious and aware of how you're allowing it to push you, right? Don't let it control you. Don't let it be such a thing where you feel like you're starting to develop like tendencies that are unhealthy, and you don't know how to cope with it, and you're starting to develop some type of OCD, maybe not like, clinical OCD or whatever, but you're like, I have to have it this way. And then you become inflexible, right? Is that how you say it? Flexible. You become so rigid that anything that goes awry will trigger you, and then you're just like, okay, like I can't, right? Because then how are you supposed to recognize the goodness in that situation? How are you supposed to be content with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when the outcome reaches you, or when you reach the outcome, right? So good anxiety, yes, you have a little bit of anxiety to where it's like, okay, I gotta do these things, right? In order to at least, expect the outcome, logically expect the outcome, right? Like, let me see if I can think of a good example, or if anybody else can think of one, feel free to share. Um, yeah. Yeah, so your first part was that, don't you need a little bit of anxiety? Yes, you do. You do. Because if you don't, then you fall into the other extreme where you're like, okay, I'll just let it, whatever happens, happens, right? You can't always do that, right? That doesn't work, especially if you are in a situation to where you really don't care what the outcome is, then okay, you can be like, whatever happens, happens, right? But if you are expecting a certain outcome, or you're trying to work towards a certain outcome, then you have to uh have at least a little bit of anxiety to where it pushes you to do the necessary actions in order to achieve it, right? Yeah, the motivator, right? Sometimes people have a hard time being self-motivated, and they only become motivated in crunch time, right? Someone with ADD. So that you lack the anxiety to really do those things, but then when it's crunch time, you somehow manage to get like 5 days worth of work done in an hour, right? So then you start to think, why can't I just have that all the time? But some people, they deal with anxiety differently too, right? The key point is like, don't control your anxiety, don't let it control you. For people that can't control it, then we have to get, for whatever our ailments are, whatever our deficiencies are, we have to find ways to cope with it, and help ourselves so that we don't fall into those situations. Did that answer part two? I didn't really catch what part two was.
Like, the outcome is not what, like when, like a lot of times I can understand, I didn't get into this school, and that I know in the long run it's better for me. But I feel like a lot of times people make it seem like in that moment I should be happy I didn't get it. But I don't know how to balance that, like, what's the balance between, no, I'm not really happy I didn't get it, but I understand in the long run I will be happy.
So that actually is the balance, right? I mentioned that you don't necessarily have to be happy with the outcome in order to be content with the outcome, right? But I also said that contentment will eventually lead you to be happy, right? Because true happiness is what? Contentment, right? True happiness is contentment. So if we have trouble um being content, then we focus on that first. And then when the situation falls upon us to where it's not our outcome, our our default, because we worked on being content, our default will then be that, okay, it's not, because like, you don't have to actively be happy that I didn't get in, right? You don't have to, if you don't get into the school you want to get into, doesn't mean you go and throw a party that I didn't get in, right? But the happiness comes that, okay, I have learned to be content with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it's not going to bring me down. right? So if you're here in your happiness level and then the outcome is not what you wanted, being content doesn't necessarily mean that you go up here in terms of happiness. No, being content means that you can just stay there. And it means that you don't go down either, right? So if we work on, right, and it's all interconnected, right? When we do the work, after we've done the work, like for instance, if somebody takes the MCAT, they study, they prep, they do everything they possibly could, right? They get enough sleep the night before, they have a good meal, right? Plenty of brain food. They take the exam. Once you've taken the exam, at that point, can you do anything else? Make dua, and you're making dua is what? You're relying upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The matter is out of our hands. It was always in Allah's hands, right? But what we could do, that was everything that was in our hands is now done, right? And what's left is whatever is left in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's hands, right? So at that point, we have to start mentally prepping ourselves that whatever happens in that outcome, right? The moment we get our scores or the moment we get the acceptance or rejection letter, in that moment, it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He decreed for it to happen. Now, does that mean that you'll never get in or you can't try again? No, that just means that, it wasn't our time. And in that moment, we recognize that maybe this is something better for me. But like I said, we're humans. We can feel sad, we can feel upset. We just don't want it to lead us to do anything that's displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't want it to throw us into despair, right? Some people, when they don't get their desired outcome, they just get triggered and they lose it, right? We don't want to be like that. We want to realize that maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved you from something that could have been harmful for you. Maybe He's preparing you to do something else or something better, or maybe something was to happen in your life that could have been very detrimental to you or your family had you gone or had your desired outcome, right? These are all things having to do with qada and qadar, right? And that it's very simple in Islam, but for us as humans to truly comprehend it, it's very complicated in our own brains, right? So yeah, sure. And then I have to go after that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I didn't realize that it's already 12:17 now. Last time I looked at the clock, it was like 12:03. But go ahead.
So my first love, Muslim man, I wanted to marry. I always thought maybe later. I used to even ask what God did. It took me maybe 20 years. I finally reached out. I was thinking, I'll be all set. I want him. He's now an atheist. Allah protect me. And I wanted him for 20 years. It wasn't meant for me. In other words, I settled him. And like, God knows that was not for me.
Mm-hmm. No, and the whole thing also is that, hindsight's 2020, right? We can always look back at situations and be like, yeah, that was better for me. This was good for me. In the moment is always the most difficult, right? So that's where we have to train ourselves to where when we're in the moment, we have to make sure that and this comes with, the statement that if you know Allah, you'll have reliance upon Him. We have to know Allah, right? We have to be aware of Him. We have to be conscious of Him. And in those moments, and we just have to keep remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Otherwise, in those moments, it'll be easy to forget. And it'll be easy to only whatever our mind is racing towards, that's what it'll latch on to. So if we are always remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then we remember that, okay, I'm in this situation, but I'm going to remain patient. I'm going to do those things that are pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Because like even in the sister's example, right? A whole lot of things could have gone wrong in that situation. There's so many different ways for that situation to um not be handled in the best way, right? But as long as we remain patient and we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we truly trust that, okay, whatever is happening right now is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm doing what I can. And if I'm not getting those results that I'm hoping for, that then yes, you can self-reflect and be like, what can I do differently? Can I do this? Can I do that? But you never despair that, okay, like I like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like what's going on? You know, we have the silver lining, we look for it, and then the wisdom we'll see later on. Right. So okay, 20 minutes over. So let me end there, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك جزاكم الله خيرا. uh inshallah, if you guys have any questions or anything, you can feel free to reach out, or if you see me at the masjid, you can come ask me, inshallah. But yeah, hopefully I haven't signed up for any other ones yet. I'm gonna be probably won't be able to sign up until December or January.
Makes sense, right?
Yeah, because there's one available November 22nd, but I'm going for Umrah, inshallah.
Inshallah.
And then December 6th is the only one that's open after that. And then next semester is all open. So the way I was doing it, if I saw like the order, if there was one that was empty, I would just take that one. Alhamdulillah, they've been ones that I really wanted to talk about. But nobody took contentment. It's honestly a lot of overlap. Right? But it's always good. If there's a lot of overlap though, I would prefer that somebody else talk about it just to get a perspective. Otherwise, like I said, it's gonna sound repetitive at some point, but the repetitiveness is not. It should not feel like mundane or redundant in the sense that like, oh, this again. No, it should be like, okay, it should be a moment of self-reflection to where have to figure out like, okay, what am I lacking in here in this particular aspect, and how can I tie in the other stuff that I've learned so far to help myself in those aspects. So like Tawakkul mentioned, it requires contentment, which we haven't talked about yet. It requires sabr, which has been talked about. It requires shukr, which has been talked about. So we have to start to learn how to implement the sabr and shukr and contentment in order to truly obtain the tawakkul that we need in our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. Okay, should I stop the meeting, right? And okay, assalamu alaikum to those online.
Walaikum assalam. See, can you mention you're doing some other stuff for the retreat, right? You're going to do another class tomorrow on the etiquettes. Is that the first one that you're doing?
Yeah, it is. It's the first one. So what I'm doing for the retreat is that we're doing like a Islamic literacy program to introduce the basics of learning or seeking Islamic knowledge. So we already did essentials of Iman or faith, and then very basic fiqh for the five pillars. And then now we're going to get into like adab and like practical spirituality, because we can talk about these things as much as we want, but until people really know how to apply it and implement it, it's just kind of out there in theory, and people just like to hear it, but then they're not exactly sure how it applies to their lives. So that will be, I think, for the next 2 weeks. There's flyers if you're part of the retreat community on WhatsApp, and I think on Facebook as well. On Instagram, I'm I'm gonna post it on my own, but as well as the retreat on Instagram has been pretty inactive, but I'm gonna push to make it a little active again, inshallah. But you can get those details. I think on the website too, it should be up there. So every module of this literacy program, we break it up to allow people to only attend those particular ones if they want. And then this will be like something that'll have levels. So this is level 1, so it's absolutely basic, no details or anything like that, just to get people introduced to these topics and subjects. And then inshallah, as the levels increase, it'll be more and more detailed.
I think the
Okay.
etiquette is very important. That's something that's so rarely talked about. So if you could do a whole course even on that for weeks, that's such a great topic, especially to teach our
Yeah,
children.
yeah, definitely. This so the level 1 of this whole program, this is our first time doing it. So level 1 was only meant to be like maximum 8 weeks, right? Because it's so introductory. But of course, as you get into each like every higher level will go over the same topics but in more detail, right? So then it might take even longer and we might need to introduce some other stuff along with those topics. So it'll continue to, hopefully it may even grow into a full blown, like program seminary type thing, inshallah. But who knows, maybe when we go into higher levels, we'll just be like, go attend sort of a seminary to supplement whatever you're learning, inshallah. But yeah, if you're
Exactly.
interested, I will be posting it. I haven't gotten around to it. It's just been really busy. But check the retreat, their website, the Facebook page. I'll try to get them to upload on the Instagram page as well. And you can look out for it on mine as well. And you can join their WhatsApp group. They do a lot of classes, mashallah. So it'll also be in person at Mass Katie 10 a.m. inshallah. So if you want to attend in person, you can feel free to come there, inshallah. Okay, so I'll end it there. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.